So welcome to episode 5 of the Rogers TV series speaking to the Community Diversity and Inclusion Strategy. During this episode, we will be hearing about the work of the Diversity and Inclusion Strategy Group Priority 4, which is to remove accessibility barriers to services, information, and spaces. Coming up shortly, we'll be having a conversation with the chair of the working group, as well as one of the other community members who sit on this working group. Hello and welcome. I'm thrilled to be here at Innovation Works with Ashfaq, Husain and Laura Clarke, and I'm hoping to have a great conversation today. So Ashfaq, I'm going to ask you right off the bat, you and I have known each other for a few years and I've always known you as Kash. So is that all right if I call you Kash?
By all means, Dharshi.
Okay, thank you. So I know that this particular task group has asked to start off this episode by acknowledging a dear committee and dedicated community member who passed away quite suddenly, Gerry LaHay. So I wondered, Kash, if you would like to say a few words to remember him.
Well, thank you very much, Dharshi. You're right. On October the 1st, I received word that a good champion in our accessibility movement, Gerry LaHay, had passed away suddenly. Needless to say, it was quite a shock, as we had met with Gerry just a week previously, in which he had made a presentation to City Council talking about our CDIS work and our progress to date. Gerry was more than just a champion. He was a good friend. He was a good advocate. We affectionately knew him by the sidewalk guy. This was a cause that he had picked up a few years ago, and he had made several presentations to the City Council on improving the clearance of snow on our sidewalks. And to all of our amazement, City Council listened to him and acted upon his recommendations. And Gerry kept on pushing, and kept on talking. And the beauty about Gerry was that even though he advocated for a lot of us and talked to many people, he made friends along the way. His conversations that he had with city councillors were refreshing. While he, as I mentioned, pushed, they didn't turn away from him. They recognized that what he was saying was valuable information, and they respected what he had to say. So these were two key elements in the way Gerry pursued accessibility issues and looked for solutions and such to the causes that he so deeply believed in. We're going to miss his voice around our table. He was an active volunteer within our priority group, and as I mentioned, a dear friend. So rest in peace, Gerry. We're all there for you.
As we move into the conversation for today, it lines up with what Gerry cared so much about. It's about accessibility. And I know you yourself have been a great and committed volunteer for many years on this topic. And I know you also sit on the City Advisory Committee related to accessibility, and you are on this task group. And I wondered whether you wanted to talk a little bit about the earlier work that you've done and how it lines up with your chairing of this task group.
Yeah. The work done at the City of London's Accessibility Advisory Committee is focused on matters around City Hall. So any recommendations that we make basically refer to Council to act upon. The CDIS Priority 4 working group is focused more on, or actually on citywide initiatives. These initiatives are coming from the citizens within London. So it is them that are given that opportunity to come, talk, discuss, look at issues, and of course work on providing answers and such to them. So it's a much broader way of looking at accessibility, and it reaches out to all four corners. It also impacts other areas that City Hall doesn't look at. For example, not just on transportation, but also on employment across the city. So it looks at the intersection of disability and immigration, and those of newcomers to London that may or may not have a disability and are looking for information. So it's a much broader way of area of looking at disability than the narrow focus in and around City Hall.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's a good point in terms of that intersectionality. And I mean, my experience with CDIS as well is that it sort of feels a lot more community responsive in terms of where the ideas are coming from. And so to that point, maybe I'll sort of switch over and talk to Laura for a minute and sort of say, Laura, you've been involved with this committee from the inception. What motivated you to join?
So I have 3 children, and my oldest is 6, and he was born with a genetic condition that led to a developmental disability. So he uses a wheelchair to navigate, and has a few other impairments. So as we kind of navigated our world with him, we started to notice that this community or this world isn't necessarily designed for him. And so for us to do very simple things like go to the park, go on a hike, go swimming, we really had to do some research ahead of time and find out, is it accessible? Is there a high back swing for him? Kind of how will we navigate all these different areas that normally you would just go to with your children? So when I heard about the City of London working group and the strategies, I was really excited to get involved and kind of bring my perspective to the group. I think that I bring the perspective of a parent navigating the world with a child with a disability, and kind of the unique perspective of that. So I was excited to share my perspective and do some good in the city.
Yeah, well, thank you. So it probably sort of hopefully made you feel excited that there was actually an initiative such as this, right? Because it's often, again, talking to folks, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and it's so important when you're making these kinds of plans that you have people who can actually speak from lived experience in terms of what you're trying to overcome. What would you say are some of the things that you're working on right now that you're looking forward to, Kash?
The discussion just had with Laura really ties into what I would call our first strategy that we're undertaking, and that is gathering information on the services and information that is available throughout London for persons with different types of disabilities. We know that in this city there are, many organizations and community centers that serve a wide spectrum of people within our community. But at the same time, we don't really know what is offered by each of these wonderful groups. So our first task is to do a survey of these organizations and charities and assemble a list of what they can provide, what services do they provide, what information do they provide, and put that into a format that people will be able to access and go through and know where they can go for a certain type of assistance. So for example, if they're looking for financial assistance in wanting to do some work within their home, or they're looking for financial assistance on programs that might be offered, or on items that they may require to assist them with their disability, we hope to be able to provide that resource for them so that it'll make it a little easier for them to shop around and know where to get. So in the end, they will know where to go to gather information.
I think that there are a lot more resources available sometimes in the community than we know of, and it would be sort of, I hope that when you get that document together, that you sort of disseminated it to, across the community so that others would know as they're working with people.
Well, yeah, the other challenge we're going to have is in what format do we make this information available? We know that it has to be fully accessible, and we want to make it widely accessible. So it's available not just for those who live in London right now, but for those who may be wanting to come to London. We have a lot of newcomers that come from overseas or come from within Ontario, within Canada, and we want them to know that London is a welcoming and inclusive place, and we can do that by making sure that the information that they seek is readily available.
Laura, is there something that you're looking forward to working on in terms of the priorities of this working group?
I agree with Kash. I think that's kind of the most exciting priority to me right now. I think it can be really overwhelming when you're trying to navigate all the different resources out there. And for me personally, it was a lot of just talking to one person who knew a little bit and then talking to another person and then going online and kind of just information gathering all on my own. And to really house it in one central location, I think will be just an amazing resource for people that are looking to kind of find out what the city has to offer. And I think that it'll also make members of the community feel really supported by the City of London if we have it on the City of London website, for example, and really feel kind of welcomed and part of the community. And this is what we have to offer. And this is everything kind of in one place will be amazing to have.
And so that kind of leads me to when we were chatting last week, Kash, you and I, a little bit about this. You mentioned the Movement 2025. And I wondered how you sort of see this work. Do you see it tying into that or sort of working towards those objectives?
Yeah, well, what you're referring to is the Accessibility for Ontarians through Disabilities Act. And according to that piece of legislation, Ontario is supposed to be fully accessible by the year 2025. So those of us in London are working, very, very hard to ensure that all the services, information, facilities, etc., that are within the boundaries of the City of London do become fully accessible. We still have a long way to go, unfortunately. We've been at it for 15 years or so, but we recognize that that there is much work to be done. There is a lot of collaboration going on with the different service organizations within London, not just those that serve persons with disabilities, but others, such as the Age Friendly Network, or they're also undertaking a lot of different studies. Student programs up at Weston and King's that are eager to participate and work with different organizations in town. So I think working collaboratively, we will eventually get there, but we still have, unfortunately, a far way to go.
Something worth kind of thinking about in terms of all of the other intersections, right? In terms of where people need to start accessing services that maybe they did not have a need for, or in some cases needed it all along. I'd like to ask both of you this question, but maybe in slightly different ways. So, the question really is, why is this priority so important? And because you shared with us sort of your personal story with your son, I wondered as you're thinking about how important this priority is to put that lens of a young person and looking down the future for your son in terms of why this work is so important right now.
I think that sometimes people with disabilities are overlooked, where there's no reason why we can't just be fully integrated into all aspects of society. I see that a lot with my son at school. He is in a mainstream classroom and he does have one-on-one support, but he's just like every other child that attends school, and all of his peers see him that way. And I think that needs to take place everywhere. So if he wants to do swimming lessons, if he wants to go to camp, everywhere that children are in the city, every child should be represented and have access to that. So it might look a little bit different, but I think that the work that we're doing to remove accessibility barriers, it can touch on every aspect, not every aspect, every area
of somebody's life, yeah.
of someone's life.
Yeah.
And I think that what we expose children to is kind of what they know and what they grow up to accept as normal. So if they see people, all diverse people of all different abilities, everywhere they are, that's their community. And being fully integrated into your community is very important.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, when you put sort of, because the overall it's a community diversity and inclusion strategy, right? So this is the ultimate inclusion piece, is that anything that anyone wants to do, they can do. And I think what I'm also hearing you say is that you have it. You don't have to ask for it. It's just something that's baked into all the planning that's happening in community at the time. Ashfaq, when you think about why this priority is so important and looking down the future, what do you think?
It's I've been thinking about this a lot. I've always felt that the work that I do isn't just for me. It's for the community, and when I say community, I mean the broader people. So not just my own community, which is persons with vision loss, but also community like Laura's children. You want to make sure that the work that is being done is going to be fruitful in 15, 20, 30 years' time. And so you try to look for the what I'd call the long haul in doing things. There are a lot of things that we have done in the last few years that have been kind of that address immediate needs. But now when looking at the long term, it's a matter of ensuring that the proper and correct policies and procedures and such are in place today, so that when issues start to come up in a couple of years or 5 years or 10 years' time, those barriers have already been removed, and the solutions can be found a lot easier and can be acted upon almost immediately. The main thing is we don't want people to think of accessibility as an add-on, but rather something that's integrated into everything that we do. So if the policies are correct and they look at the total inclusion of all Londoners within a certain segment, within a certain area, then I think our work will be done. But to get there, we still have a lot of talking and discussions to do.
And a lot of advocacy to do, right? So to tie in like both of your points is, in order to, when you look down the road, the fact that you're sort of saying anything that a child wants to do, they can do. Their community includes everybody. And so it's not an add-on. So, I think that's a really critical point to consider. I think we're sort of close to wrapping up here. Any final thoughts in terms of the work of your working group that you'd like to share and highlight, if you wanted to tell the community about or share with the community?
Laura, do you want to?
I think I'm just excited that we are starting to make kind of progress with the pandemic, it slowed us down a little bit, but now we're kind of ramping back up and getting action on our action items. Hopefully we'll be able to kind of meet in person again one day. We've been kind of virtual for the last little bit, as everyone else has been.
Yeah. So Kash, would you, as we're sort of wrapping up here, would you like to share a few of the other strategies that the working group has taken on?
Sure. Well, you know, there are certain key things that all of us with disabilities need to have access to, and that is transportation, employment, and getting in and out of buildings. In other words, accessible buildings. So we have some really interesting strategies that we're working on in and around these areas. We're always, of course, looking for people to come and share their concerns and issues and such with us, and I'm certainly hoping that they will do so. As far as transportation, for example, we're working with Age-Friendly London on a number of projects that they have worked on. Buildings, we're looking to promote the City of London's Facility Accessibility Design Standard, FADS, within the broader community, so that architects and developers will use that design standard in any new construction and any new renovations that they undertake. This way we can then assure that there is uniformity in the design and accessibility features available throughout the City of London. And of course, working with employment, there is a priority on employment priority number 5, and we are ensuring that working with the people around that table there, that those of us with disabilities who are eager to become part of the broader community need to have access to not just a job, but a good, well-paying job as well. So we ask that if you're interested in any of these initiatives, come and join our committees and come and work with us and sit around the table and share your knowledge and experience with the rest of us there.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, I think all of the 5 priorities have some overlap, but this is a really
Definitely.
important lens as well to apply to each of the other 4 as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for watching this episode. Please tune in next time for the next episode that we will be airing, which is Priority 5, which speaks to removing barriers to employment. As you've heard Kash and Laura speak today, they spoke about a lot of work that the working group is doing, lots of work that needs to be done, and I think also, even for me as I leave today, there's a lot of personal education I feel like I need to do, and I'm going to put that call out to you as well, to learn more about the issues related to accessibility and how we can work together to make London accessible city. To learn more about the Community Diversity and Inclusion Strategy, please log on to london.ca/CDIS. Thank you for watching.